Hey, you like cars? Yes, we are back again for another classic episode of CarQuicks. You know what episode number it is, right? No, you don't, because I haven't said it. But you know what time it is, though. Episode 56, CarQuicks. Yes. So, how y'all doing? Everybody good, feeling great. How the car is treating you, how your loved ones, the children, the kids, the friends, the family. I just literally snapped off a piece of my son's car, and we're gonna put it back together. And it's back. Okay, it's fixed. You see, this is a Mustang that he modified. You know, slanted wheels with the camber, lowered. They don't come like this. This is him modifying it. So shout out to Zuriel when he comes to his ability to craft and create, because he got the eye for it. But we're here to talk about something else in particular. We're going to drive into some news on the car news. And we got a couple things to talk about, some big news. If you see on the video, I'm over here sweating because I was outside and, you know, in the city, in the state of Texas, it's what we call the preheat season. Okay, it's just getting started, but it's already at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, it's blazing outside. But we're here to talk about the cars. And we're here to talk about something very important, very unique. I don't want to say very unique. It's not very unique. It's unique in the sense that the car that is going this route is an icon. It's one that many people, they may not even like the idea that this is happening, right? Because when it comes to cars being electrified in any manner, there are those that embrace the electrification of cars. There are those that don't like the ideology behind it. And there's some people that don't like the political context when it comes to some of it. And the other, it gets very complicated, right? I keep it very simple. I like technology. I like cars. If you can put them together and make something compelling, I'm all for it. So the 911, Porsche for the 2025 992.2, which is the refresh of the 992.1, like the mid-cycle refresh, they are introducing a hybrid 911. Now, this is a huge deal because we've already been talking about this. They've hinted at it. They've shown it, testing. They've kind of alluded to the idea like, hey, at some point in time, we're going to put one of our electric motors and one of our drivetrains inside of this car. And last episode, I kind of hinted at it. I said, hey, they've been driving it for 3 million miles, and by next week, they're going to announce it. Well, they did. Back on like May 28th, I think it was last week, they announced the 911 hybrid, and I'm intrigued. Like, it's dope what they did. It's dope how they did the packaging, the motor. Let me just run down a couple of the stats that we're talking about. The previous 992.1 uses a 3-liter twin-turbo flat six. That's going away. They made a brand new 3.6-liter single-turbo flat six, but this is an electric turbo because it has an electric component to it to help spin up the turbine, reduce turbo lag, and in combination with this new motor, even though it's much bigger, you probably would think that the power numbers are like through the roof, but in base form, it makes 478 horsepower. That's only 5 horsepower more than the previous generation. Torque remains the same at 420 foot-pounds. But the GTS model is where we get the option for the T-Hybrid, which stands for turbo hybrid. Not the plug-in one like the Panamera, which is like e-hybrid. This hybrid setup, Porsche didn't do any electric like drive mode. No, you're not going to get in this thing. And like I said before, you're not driving to Whole Foods to pick up some groceries in electric mode. Sorry, you're not doing it. This is like the 918 Spider, right? Where the hybrid platform was strictly for performance. And that's the same thing here. The T-Hybrid uses a 1.5 kilowatt battery by 400 volt system that adds like 56, what is the number? 56 horsepower to the equation, and 54 horsepower and about another 29 foot-pounds of torque. So at 478, we jump to 533, and then the torque goes to 449. You combine that with the battery. It also has an electric motor generator that's attached to the 8-speed PDK transmission. All that together, the weight goes up like 100 pounds. And that's usually where people have an issue because cars have gotten bigger. If you look at an old school 911, like a 964 next to a 992, it's like triple the size. The cars are massive. Porsches now have 21s in the rear tires, not little baby 17s and stuff like that. So the cars are getting bigger, so they're getting heavier. Now it weighs 356,000 pounds instead of 3,433, which is a small amount. It's only 100 pounds extra. But on the GTS model, the T-Hybrid with the extra horsepower, you're not going to feel the difference because the 0 to 60 time is still 2.9 seconds. The top speed is still well over 183 miles per hour. So we're still getting performance. The base Carrera gets 388 horsepower, which is similar to what the previous generation had, even with the bigger motor. The inside, before I jump to the inside, the outside has a few details. On the GTS Hybrid, you'll definitely know you're looking at one because it has these grills that are set at the very bottom of the bumper that are sitting upright, and that's for like active cooling. Headlights have been changed. The rear light bar has been updated for these models. But then you get to the interior. And the interior is a part where I've noticed some pictures that I've seen compared to the previous one. And it's noticeable that we're kind of going towards the more digital, less analog route. Maybe in these models, maybe not in the GTS, GT3 models, but in this particular one, we have a 12.6-inch digital cluster image display, but there's no analog dial in the center. Like the tachometer that used to be there, that tach is no longer analog, it's digital now. The buttons to start the Porsche, little key you put to the left side and turn it, not there anymore. We just got a push start button, which looks basic, honestly. It's just a plastic push start button. And it kind of, I don't know, it just feels like when I saw that and I saw some people talking about, kind of takes away from some of the character. Like Porsche's always had this character of like the key, the starting, the analog display, Chrono Sport package. So it's on one hand, it's a little bit sad to see the distance that's getting pushed onto what these cars are becoming more digital, as opposed to having more, like you can still digitize, I don't want to say digitize, but you can modernize cars, introduce technology, but still pay good homage to where we came from, like where the analog stage was. I don't know how I feel about this interior going so digital with the cluster, but I mean, it's still a Porsche. So overall, it still does look good. I'm sure when you add maybe the Sport Chrono package and deviated stitching and all the other color options you have, this thing will start looking really good as well. But it also pointed to another thing that got announced, and that was the potential that there is no manual transmission for the 2025 models. They said that the GTS T-Hybrid, when it launches, is only available in 8-speed PDK. Now, Porsche is good on listening to owners, enthusiasts wanting their name to be synonymous with a driver's car. So I don't think it means it's not going to happen ever. I think when they launch it, they're probably going to just check to see what the temperature is, check the vibes. Hey, are we really looking for a manual transmission? Because we can put one in. If nobody's saying anything, we're going to keep it with the 8-speed with the electric motor on it. Now, if you go manual on a T-Hybrid, I do wonder what changes when it comes to how the whole entire system is built, because the way they have this integrated when it comes to the battery, the electric motor / generator, and how it can harvest energy from the turbocharger, from the motor, from the brake system. How does that happen with the transmission if you go manual? Because the speed in which that the electric motor assists when it comes to shifting, all that doesn't matter anymore because you're doing it manually. Maybe it simplifies the system. Maybe it complicates things. Who knows? Or maybe Porsche comes out and says, listen, we can't put it on that system because that's not how we designed it for now. Who knows what the future does hold? But I do know that I'm going to do a series, and I've talked about this plenty of times, but whenever I see cars like the Porsche come out, the T-Hybrid, I know I got to do this series when I want to go live where I do car configurations because I do that stuff in my own spare time. I don't know what I'm going to call it. I think I want to call like I Wish I Was a Baller. I don't know if you know that song, old school 90s hip-hop song, Wish I Was a Baller, Wish I Was 6 foot tall, anyways. But I'm gonna do a series about that. But as far as the Porsche, comes out 2025 model. I think it launches sometime in summer, fall. You can already configure it. It ain't cheap. The regular one is 133,000. Carrera, the 992.2 GTS T-Hybrid starts at like 183,000. If I'm correct, it could be a little bit wrong, could be a little bit less. We're still talking about near 200,000 before you get the party started. And if you know Porsche, that number, you add enough options to it, and it's going to go through the roof. Now, as a idea of whether people that were, let's say you wanted to buy a Turbo S, right? Most people bought those as PDK. Those are 600 plus horsepower, basically a supercar, but they also cost supercar money. But I do think the T-Hybrid with the horsepower it makes now, the 533, the speed it is, the electric powertrain, not the electric powertrain, but the electric components to the drivetrain, the performance benefits, I can see many possible turbo buyers saying, I want to try out the T-Hybrid, save some money, get very close to the performance. I am waiting to see when they test these against. All the articles when this came out, they just got a test drive around the track, and all the journalists said, hey, from the seat where I'm sitting, from the passenger, this thing still performs at the highest of levels, okay? So they're not losing any performance, because the losing of performance is always a fear. People are like, man, you put hybrid. It does complicate things. I do wonder how the aftermarket acts to this, because Porsche is a big aftermarket company when it comes to people modifying them. So I do wonder how they approach T-Hybrid, what they can do, the new single turbo, electric turbo setup, which that sounds really cool too, because you're talking about the lack of turbo lag. They said that the electric portion of the turbo can spin up to like 120,000 RPMs, like immediately, reducing turbo lag, giving it like 110 foot-pounds of instant torque. It's cool. This is cool. It may not be as analog, it may not be as visceral, maybe as like a Singer or old, air-cooled Porsche, but I still think it's cool. Continue on with new car models and things that are going to come out. Chevy, they teased again the ZR1, but this time they had a little exhaust tone clip of the sound, which I'm going to insert here. You're going to hear in a second. But the rumors are that it's going to have over 900 horsepower. That's outrageous. I don't know if it's going to have all-wheel drive. I do not think so, because the E-Ray was the only one that had all-wheel drive because of the electric motor. Don't know what it's going to look like. I would say, if I'm going to wager against what it's going to look like, look at the Z06 track package and make it more aggressive. I mean, bigger wing, bigger front lip, bigger openings for the air intakes and for the intercoolers and everything else. There's a lot going on with this, okay? The flat plane V8 that's in the Z06 already sounds amazing. You add twin turbos, we need bigger intercoolers, oil coolers, more plumbing. It's just more components. So I would imagine that things like the front grills, the side grill vents that are on the doors, some of those enlarge, just more of aggressive nature and look. But over 900 is crazy. I can't wait for that to come out, because that's going to kind of lean up well against Mustang and the GTD. And the GTD very recently has been talked about because they got 7,500 applications for this Mustang that costs $325,000. One, that's a lot of people with $325,000, but that doesn't surprise me. That's the world we live in. Two, I think the GTD is awesome. I love how I've talked about it plenty of episodes ago. I called it Ford's Blue Oval's GT3 fighter, which I stand by. That's an 800 horsepower V8. I mean, that against a ZR1, against a GT3 RS, that's going to happen. I can't imagine the likes of Car and Driver, Haggerty, or anybody else isn't going to put their journalists inside of that comparison to put up against the best of the best, especially for the ZR1, because we have the GT500, we have the Dark Horse, which would be, I guess, close to what the Z06 does in a way, but not all the way. But the GTD They might put it up against the Z06 and see what it can do and then get to the ZR1. But the GTD is in the news. It's on Nürburgring. It's supposedly rumors breaking records. It looks aggressive. It looks dope. And now we have the ZR1 coming. So the American but the American sports cars, the upper reach Halo sports cars, are delivering some really dope models that are coming out. Subaru, though, while everybody else is trying to make exciting cars, GR Corollas and ZR1s and things like that, Subaru likes to continue to play with people's emotions. They released a new model of the WRX, right? And maybe you're like, oh, STI? Nah, because that would be too smart. An STI would make too much sense. So we're not going to do that. We're going to release the TS model. If you remember a couple podcasts ago, there was a video of them announcing the Subaru WRX TR model. And when I say the disappointment was deafening, when they took that cover off, they're like, the TR. Everybody was like, what are we doing? That looks just like a regular WRX GT model. The difference was the TR got like the WRX GT features, but you can get a manual. Because the regular WRX GT with the Recaro bucket seats and the bigger brakes, it only came in a sport CVT, which was, again, another dumb decision. So now Subaru has released a TS, which stands for Tuned by STI. Yo, you can't make this stuff up, man. Not an STI, but tuned by the guys that I'm sure would love to get their hands and get free reign to truly show you what the WRX can do if we put some true performance pedigree behind it. So, what's the difference? It has electronic dampers. I can't, I mean, it's nothing else to say. Hilarious. So, Subaru releases the TS model, the WRX. Listen, save your money. Go get a regular WRX if that's what you want. One day, maybe one day we will get blessed properly with an STI model, because I've said before, I have a GR Corolla because I was waiting for an STI. I saw the WRX. I wasn't feeling the body cladding. I was upset with how things turned out, but I said there's hope. I saw the best motoring renders of what the STI could look like, 400 horsepower motor. I was like, I'm ready to play. And they were like, it's not happening. And so here we are. We got a TR and a TS model. Just tuned by STI, not an STI. But continuing on with some news, Toyota is not really in the greatest of light right now. And that's not normally what we talk about. Normally, Toyota is like the king of reliability and sales, and people love the cars. I mean, I told you, my wife drives a Toyota Sienna. I'm in the Sienna forums. They're still charging markups on minivans. It's wild out here. But on the Tundra, Toyota had to do a recall on the Tundra because for a while I've been reading about this 3.5 liter V6 twin turbo essentially blowing up. Okay, if you go on the forums, there are plenty of articles. People are not happy with what's going on, especially considering that before we got to the twin turbo 3.5 liter V6, we had a 5.7 liter V8 that was basically a tank. Now, there are some model years that may not have been the greatest, but overall, because I had a Toyota Sequoia that had this 5.7 liter V8, that thing just rides. My mother-in-law had a Sequoia with over 300,000 miles. That was her second one. She got up to that high. Ours had over 200. I mean, those cars and those motors and Tundras are just known to just run and run. So the people that have had those trucks and have been driving them and running them until the wheels fell off and the motor is still kicking, they go and get the new Tundra. If this starts happening, it definitely does not bode well for the confidence on what the future can hold. So the issue that they found with the motors basically grenading themselves or having issues with the main bearings was that they said during the assembly process, there is a chance, and they say chance, but clearly it's been documented. It's happening, that there is debris that wasn't cleaned out of the engine block before it got reassembled. So basically what they're saying is we machined the block. There's still little metal shavings in there. We put it together, filled it up with oil. People started driving them. All of a sudden, cars is ticking, knocking, falling apart, and they're like, how'd the metal get into the motor? And you know, when you're going to dealerships as a owner of a car and something like this happens, which is catastrophic, one, Toyota probably at first is denying claims. Two, the dealership is like, you must have done something wrong. Especially if you're a person that doesn't bring it back to the dealer to get service, they'll be like, oh, well, our records show you never did an oil change here. Like, people can't do oil changes anywhere else. And so then the blame starts to get passed around, knowing that there was a problem because enough people came forward to say, so we have a recall now of it. And so we'll see. I mean, they'll fix it up. They're still going to sell Tundras. It ain't like people are going to stop buying them trucks. I just think that they'll get better sales when the next model year comes and they confirm like we have changed our manufacturing process to not have this happen again. And speaking about some other Toyotas, the Supra is no more after 2026. It's over. And I'm really intrigued with what they're going to do next because, like, is there a partnership? Like, they said that they still have a partnership with BMW. They still have one with Subaru. They said they're going to continue that partnership. But BMW and the Supra and how they partnered with that was based on the Z4 and the Supra. And I don't know what they're going to do. They haven't said if they're bringing one back. They're not creating another one. Here, I have a theory. Here's me and a good friend of mine. We were talking about what the future could hold. I think they should bring back the Celica name, right? So we have the GR86 and we have the GR Corolla. And then come next year, they're going to say there's no more GR Supras. There's only going to be two models in that lineup, GR86, GR Corolla. I can see a place where there is a GR Celica, or maybe they go back to the old name when it was Celica Supra, that is not as expensive as the Supra was, maybe not as much horsepower, but like imagine a mid 400 horsepower I guess another rear wheel drive coupe, which might impede on the GR86 sales. But I think there's a place for a Celica somewhere in that lineup. Maybe push a little bit higher, 400 horsepower, not a Supra, or we redesign and make an all-new Supra with an all-new motor. I don't even know if Toyota has a motor for that car. Some people say they can put two of the G16 motors like in the GR Corolla, the 3-cylinder one. They're like, put two of those together and you got the new 3JZ or whatever people could say. I don't think that's that easy. And I don't even know if they're really thinking about doing something like that. But I don't think that they're going to keep putting the 3-cylinder that's in my car in all these other models. They could do it in the GR86 and that would make it a monster of a car, especially for drifting, road course, driver engagement. That would be amazing. So Supra is no longer, and it's kind of sad because I grew to like the new Supra, even though when I first saw it, I was adamant on they have played all of us. But hey, that's what happens. Like I said, some of these cars in videos, on pictures, they're not looking that great. You got to see this stuff front and center to decide if it actually looks good or not, because these pictures and these angles, sometimes you're like, this looks terrible. Now, getting on to something else that was launched and talked about, kind of, quick getting to wrapping this up. Jeep announced the Wagoneer S, which is their electric EV. It's touted as the American Range Rover because it's a luxury SUV. And it looks fairly decent. When I say decent, it's not going to get lost in the sea of SUVs when you park it because it doesn't look that distinct, but it has some cool character features. The front end has like a slimmer, obviously recognizable Jeep grille. The rear has like a sloped spoiler integrated into the rear quarter panel hatch, though it does get lost in the tint of the rear window and the gloss black of the wing. So it doesn't look bad. It does look good. So we have this 0 to 6. They talked about the 0 to 60 time. I don't know why we talk about the 0 to 60 time so much, but that's just what we do. So 0 to 60 of 3.4 seconds. because it has 600 horsepower and 617 foot-pounds of torque. I still think it's wild that these giant SUVs is doing these type of numbers. I just talked about a Porsche 911 doing a 2.9. That's another thing too. I feel like some of these sports car companies are like, man, we got these SUVs that are like on our back. We got to start putting some separation. So now everything under 4 seconds, under 3.5 seconds, like that's just regular. So 3.4 seconds, 600 horsepower, 617 foot-pounds of torque. There's also over 300 miles of range. I say over. I put air quotes because there is no confirmation on what the miles range is going to be. And you know, when it comes to electric cars, that wildly can vary. You might have 300 miles of range, depends on what you're using in the SUV. Charge speeds are being touted at 100 kilowatts, 20 to 80% in 23 minutes, which obviously you must need a proper fast charger, but that's not bad. I'm not mad at that. 20 to 80% in 23 minutes, that's a good look. It has 4-wheel drive, Jeep, you already know that. But it also has 3 electric motors that it call EDMs, electric drive modules, or electronic dance music. EDMs is a funny name for that. But the front 2 units can run independently. Like they can be disengaged when you're on the highway to essentially run a 2-wheel drive mode, which I would imagine helps when it comes to the mileage and the range when it comes to how far this thing can go. So I think the 300 miles is definitely bringing that 4-wheel drive setup into play. Because if you can go into 2-wheel drive, you're doing less drag, less components running on the battery system, so you get longer range. It still is a heavy SUV. This still is like 6,000 pounds, 5,667 pounds. And it could tow 3,400 pounds, but weight, battery, all the features inside, I mean, it's going to need a lot to get to the range that they're talking about. The rear wing also does help when it comes to the drag coefficient, because I did read about that is 0.29, which is really low. And they said that the lead chief designer talked about that being what they use to help them get to the range that they speak about. Now, the interior is where I have some opinions, right? There is 45 inches of screen. 45. That's a big screen TV. Now, obviously, it's not right in your face, but we got 12.3 inches in the digital display, 10 inches on a heads-up display. Passenger has a display. The driver instrument cluster is a display. The the climate control is on its own separate screen that's hidden away and motorized to come down when you need to change the AC or the heat or the heated seat or the massaging seat. If it has that, I'm sure it probably does. Like, what is going on? Like, we got screens on screens on screens. And I want to talk about something about this. These electric cars, they don't have to have 9 million screens. Like, there's a 10-inch heads-up display. Why would you want the climate controls to be on a motorized screen? That sounds like a recipe for disaster. Why would I want that? Like, give me nice analog buttons and knobs. And that can still look good and luxurious. Have you ever looked at a Pagani? That hypercar is nothing but toggles and switches, titanium, metal, aluminums, and it looks like the greatest thing you ever seen. So you could have buttons, we can have switches. It's the switch gear, it's the metal, it's the tactical feel of it. It can have that. We don't have to have everything stuffed into a Uconnect software base in order to run the thing. Screens does not make the car futuristic, or to me, make it look more futuristic when you get inside. What I see is distractions. Some of the other luxury car manufacturers, especially Mercedes, has said we are getting back to adding more buttons because people have been like, I don't want just screens. It's fingerprint city. Like, you're going to have to wear those microfiber gloves. Remember, I said that a long time ago, joking, saying we're getting to the point now you need to be like the old days in the 50s and 40s. They drove with gloves. Yes, you need to start driving with gloves on, because it's just going to be smudges, or 45 inches of smudges, okay, across the dashboard. The climate control thing to me is also a testament to just overdoing things. Anybody that sees that is going to say, so when that inevitably breaks, or one day I'm hot and the screen don't want to come down, now I got to go through the manual or go through the menu on the other screen to then get to what. Come on, man. Just give us the standard buttons for the core features and settings and systems of the car. And you put everything else behind the screen. Have fun at it. But I do think that when we talk about the texting and driving, talking and eating and driving, all these distractions, I look at these screens and I say, how are those not distracting? How are they not even a health concern? Mad blue screen. It just, you got to wear the blue screen, the gaming goggles on there when you're driving your car. You just got screens staring at you. So inside of this, there's also a 19-speaker McIntosh 1,200-watt stereo luxury car, luxury SUV. I'm sure it sounds absolutely fantastic because that company doesn't make anything that isn't high-end. Like I said, I talked about the weight. I talked about what it can tow. And it's a luxury SUV, right? They said it's like the American Range Rover. And what does it cost? It starts at $71,995. Ah, man. So when they announced this SUV, I made a comment on some page I followed that did the reveal. And I said, I just wish that these companies and manufacturers would just release EVs that actually read the room. A $72,000 SUV in this current economic climate, in this current vehicle climate of markups and motors blowing and manufacturing being put up to question and airplanes falling out the sky. It's just really a wild time in general. But to have a $72,000 Jeep starting, like the only Jeep that really had like a high amount of price and cost, like $100,000, because they existed, was Trackhawk. And they sold every one of those because that was to the enthusiasts, the performance enthusiasts. And that's a different niche. But we're talking about electric vehicle adaptation or adoption, not adaptation. We want to have people adopt buying electric vehicles, right? That's the MO for some of these companies, right? They want to make more electric vehicles. Obviously, there's many different opinions on the reasoning behind that, but let's just say we want people to come and buy electric vehicles from us. Why would I want to spend $72,000 on your first swing at it? And Jeep isn't really in the reaches of that market. 72,000 starting means that when I add in that 19 speakers, when I add in maybe all the digital displays, when I add in the wheels, when I add in the other features, when I add in the color I want, the leather, the stitching, talking about what, $82,000 Jeep? Getting near to 100,000 interest payments. I mean, this is crazy because it doesn't help prove that you're trying to have people adopt it. If the idea is let's get the wealthy 1%ers to be the first ones to adopt, they're not doing that. They're buying true luxury cars. Range Rovers, Bentleys, Mercedes, BMW, Porsche. They're buying the brands that have been catering to that market for that long. Nobody's cross-shopping a Range Rover and a Wagoneer S. I mean, maybe they are. Maybe there's a few people that are going to say, I want to see what made my bang for my buck. But if that's the case, I would just go over to Kia or Genesis and get one of their luxury EVs that they make, that their SUVs to me look better than this does. So when I saw this, I was like, either we're going to adopt or have people really get to using EVs if you introduce one that actually is reasonable, $40,000 and under. The idea of a $25,000 one comes up again. Marquez Brownlee, he has a channel. I'll follow him on his tech channel. He has an auto channel. And he talked about that too. Is it possible? It's possible. It really just comes down to how much the stuff costs, manufacturing, the cost going down as more people adopt it. You can get to $30,000 EV. Because I think when you do that, and if you have the right infrastructure around it, the right company behind it, more people adopt it. But a $72,000 luxury EV, SUV, we don't need no more of these. If you have 80 to $100,000 to spend on a car, you've never had more options than you do now, which is crazy. We're talking about there are more options in the $70,000 to $100,000 range than it is 50 and under. Like, if you got money, you're like, man, the world is my oyster. I got a plethora of cars and SUVs to pick from. If you say, I only want to spend $32,000 on an SUV, I'm going to say, all right, go holler at Nissan with the kicks. Barely can get a CRV, get an old one, not getting a brand new one. Don't look for the RAV4 Prime. That ain't happening. Like, your options are so limited. But whenever you got a new SUV coming out, first thing, 0 to 60, 3 seconds. Weighs this much. Goes 300 miles of range. 19 speaker stereo system. 40 inches of screen. $72,000. I mean, come on. I just think it doesn't actually speak to wanting to bring the market forward. And maybe I could be wrong. Maybe there are plenty of people that have been banging and sending emails to Jeep like, please, you know what we want? We want a $72,000 electric SUV. Speaking about electric trucks and SUVs, there was a funny story I read about a person who bought a CyberTruck, and then when they got back to their apartment complex, found out it couldn't fit in their parking spot. I mean, idiocy is running rampant these days. But how do you buy a Cybertruck? And Cybertrucks they're much bigger in person when you see one. How do you buy one and you never check to see if your truck can fit in that little compact parking spot you have? What car were you driving before? Were you in a hatchback? A Model 3? Did the Model 3 fit comfortably in that space? Did you feel like you had ample space to get out? Was the parking spot like going to Costco? See, Costco got them real deal parking spots. Enough room to put a cart down the middle, put stuff in, get it out, turn around, dance. But, I mean, apartment complexes are like, we're trying to squeeze as many as y'all in here as we can. And why are you trying to buy a Cybertruck? And I'm like, come on, man. Come on. That's just a funny story. Talk about, and they can't sell it back. They try to get Tesla to allow them to sell it, and they're like, no, you're not going to sell it because, you know, they're talking about some people getting hit with a $50,000 fine. So they're just sitting on a brick, literally and figuratively. But before I leave, there are some GR Corolla updates, and you know I love those. So on my YouTube channel, if you haven't been liking and subscribing to the CarQuicks YouTube channel and you're listening to the audio of my podcast, I appreciate you listening. Thank you for being here. Now, please, when we're done, let's go over to YouTube, go to CarQuicks channel. You hit the like and you hit the subscribe on whatever video you choose to. It can be the podcast video. Now, GR Corolla updates. A friend of mine, on his GR Corolla, we installed a 6-element turbo inlet part on his car. I have the video for that. It completely, I don't want to say completely, but it very much changed the dynamics of how that car performed, the performance of it, what it was doing, how it was driving, the turbo response, the throttle response, the way the boost built. Very nice part. And then I recorded my 30,000 mile update, and video's doing great because I knew most people would say, how you got 30,000 miles on this car already? It's only been a little bit over a year. I bought mine in February of 2023. It's now June of 2024, 31,000 miles. I'm a little bit over 30. And it was just me discussing, I was keeping it fairly simple. If you followed my journey on that, I've done it at 2, I did it at 1,000. I did a podcast where I was driving back home for 5 hours, talking about how the car was. I did one for 1,000, 2,000, 9,000, 15,000, and now 30,000. And I'll circle back around when I'm close to like 50, but I just talked about how the car has been as an owner, how it's treated me, how much I still enjoy it, how much I love how it performs and how it runs. So for me, it's been more than an enjoyable experience. Some people, there are opinions on it. Like, cars are subjective, and enthusiasts, we have our things that we love, the things we hate, the things we're biased towards. And listen, there is some bias towards a car that I searched out and looked for and bought, but I still understand some of the concerns people have, or some of the ideas that people think of what they don't like about it. And I can understand those, appreciate that opinion, and understand that there's different ideas of what people want out of the car. So I did my 30,000 mile update, talked about certain things I'm doing, Don't have no parts coming in just yet. I'm pretty much just enjoying it. I actually made a little bit of a quick bit of news that I don't have to really drive my car daily drive anymore for changes in my own life. So the car's sitting kind of in the driveway. I drove it this week to the supermarket that was like 3 miles away and parked it. So the furthest it's been since Saturday is about a 6-mile road trip. So the mileage is not going to speed up at the rate it was going. So that next update might not come for a long time, because the 15,000 mile range, I think, was around August, September, and then I sped it up because I did a lot of road trips. But I do have a big road trip coming up. Not a road trip, but I'm driving up to a city that's hours away, so I'm going to put some miles on it then. But other than that, it's been fantastic ownership. I love it. I can't wait till I have more money to add some more parts to it. Things cost. But until then, and in between then, as I always say, I'm glad that you were here listening to episode 56. I can't wait till I get to like episode 100. And I probably got to do something for that, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. But as I always say, do as you wish and do as you may. Cameron Biggs, your host. This was CarQuicks. I'll see y'all around on the next one. Take care.